Chapter 1. Tap. 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 Duranium metal claws clacked slowly against the armrest of the command chair. The supreme commander of the droid armies sat in deep contemplation as he stared at the twinkling stars outside the massive viewport of his flagship, the Malevolence. It had been some time since he had taken on an assignment worthy of his skill set. Currently, the Clone Wars were in their infant stages, had yet to truly begin. How he longed for the thrill of battle. To crush his opponents beneath his feet and revel in the victories that were sure to be his. Right now, what did he have? Boredom. Not even the droids he commanded on his ship were enough to distract the cyborg Kalish from his silent ponderings. At this point he would welcome any distraction. It had been a few galactic weeks of traveling between separatist systems, awaiting word from his overlords to direct him on a course of action vital to the separatist cause. All of this waiting was starting to make him antsy. It was taking too long and he was itching for a fight. He got up from his chair and paced from one end of the command deck to the other, ignoring the monotonous tasks the droids were performing. A B-1 battle droid approached him, effectively halting his pacing. "Sir, Count Dooku has ordered that you make contact with him immediately." At last. General Grievous approached a holocom unit and activated it. Count Dooku appeared, his arms crossed seriously. "Greetings, General. I have a mission for you. You will go to the Yavin system and assassinate a band of 7 renegade Jedi. Consider this a test. Once you have completed your mission, report back to me immediately." General Grievous bowed graciously before his master. "Consider it done." The hollow image of Count Dooku blinked out of existence. Grievous clenched his mechanical hands into fists. Finally, a challenge worthy of his talent. 7 Jedi. There would be plenty of new trophies to add to his ever-growing collection. He whirled around and started barking orders. "Fire up the engines, set coordinates for the Yavin system, and jump to lightspeed immediately." He turned to regard his droid captain. "You're in charge while I am away. I have to prepare for the mission." With that, the general left the bridge and went to his quarters where he kept his few meager possessions. He donned his cape and grabbed 4 lightsabers from his trophy case and stuffed them in his cloak. He then proceeded to go to the hangar bay where a squad of droids marched in perfect unison directly ahead of him and stopped to stand at attention awaiting further instruction. "I want scouts to find where those 7 rogue Jedi are hiding." One of the B-1 battle droids stepped out of formation, raising his hand. But sir, I'm not a scout." Grievous growled and stalked closer and towered over the quaking droid. This one must have had a serious defect in its processor. All droids on his ship were aware of the infamous general's angry outbursts and tendency to destroy any droid unlucky or stupid enough to cross him. Today, however, he felt he was in a good mood and had patience enough to deal with this one. "If you are not up to the task, I will scrap you here and now." No, General. Scouting. How hard can that be?" The fortunate droid stepped back in line. "Any further questions?" The droid squadron remained silent. "Good. Once we reach the Yavin system, you will disperse and search the moons in the system capable of supporting life. I want those Jedi found." Roger, Roger." In approximately 2 hours, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. Beside his flagship, 2 other support cruisers escorted them. General Grievous sent squadrons of droids to scout ahead, in the hopes of locating his targets. Sooner than expected, 1 squad reported in declaring they had located 2 of the 7 Jedi hiding out on Yavin 13. The cyborg clasped his hands behind his back and patiently awaited word from the others. A few more hours went by and another squad reported that 2 more Jedi were discovered on Yavin 8. Now where could those last 3 be hiding? General Grievous knew the question was rhetorical and laughed, coughing soon after. One of the droid's scouts appeared on a handheld hollow emitter. "Sir, we have landed on Yavin 4, we see what appears to be a temple structure of some sort, but we have been unable to determine if there are any The droid was lifted up into the air by an unseen force and slammed violently into a nearby tree, destroying it. The hollow image disappeared before Grievous could identify the target. There was no need. It was a Force user who destroyed his droid, which meant the last 3 Jedi must be hiding there. Only 3 of the 26 moons were habitable. So now he knew exactly where they were. What had Grievous in an even happier mood was that the 7 Jedi were foolish enough to split up into teams. It would have been near impossible to take on all 7 at the same time. He decided to visit Yavin 13 first. It would be easy to locate the 2 Jedi's encampment since the moon itself was composed mostly of rocky plains and deserts. Oh, they could certainly run from him, but they sure couldn't hide. Grievous had 4 Magna Guards, 16 B-2 battle droids, and 20 B-1 battle droids accompany him in his assault craft to the surface of Yavin 13. They landed about a mile from the enemy's campsite. These Jedi were foolish. The smoke from their campfire gave away their position. "I want you droids to wait here. I will take care of this myself." The droids did as instructed and waited with the ship. General Grievous set out to accomplish his task, eagerly fingering 2 of the lightsabers concealed within his cloak. It did not take him long to reach the campsite, and fortune was on his side. The 2 Jedi were sitting by the campfire, unknowingly eating their last meal. The elder of the 2 noticed Grievous's approach and stood to greet him. "Welcome, stranger. What brings you out this way?" Grievous clasped his hands behind his back in a non-threatening manner. "Why, to meet the 2 of you, of course." The man looked rather confused. "You know us?" "Not personally. Only by association." "Who are you?" Grievous's name, his reputation, and his identity were still a secret. No one knew who he was. They soon would. For the first 5 minutes at least. "I am your Doom Jedi." Grievous pulled out his lightsabers and twirled them in eager anticipation. The young lad who accompanied the elder Jedi, most likely the apprentice, ignited his lightsaber. The Jedi Master activated his violet blade and moved into a defensive stance. "We have no quarrel with you." "That makes one of us," Grievous laughed maniacally. "Then you leave us no choice." Grievous growled deeply and swung his lightsaber at the Jedi Master's head. The man easily blocked his attack and launched a flurry of his own. The cyborg locked blades with the Master and saw the apprentice circling around in the hopes of attacking him from behind. Grievous kicked out a sharply taloned foot and knocked the lightsaber out of the boy's hand, also managing to wound him. He used all of his strength to shove the Master back and ran at the boy, who was scrambling madly for his lightsaber a few feet away. "Say goodbye to your master, boy. He will soon meet your fate." Before he could destroy the Jedi lad, his master came to his rescue. He dove beneath Grievous and met his downward slash with a high block. He attempted to leg sweep the cyborg, but the sly general saw it coming and lifted his leg and brought it down hard in the hopes of crushing the man's ribs. The Jedi rolled clear of his large geranium foot and slashed his saber at his leg. Grievous easily blocked with one saber and slashed at the man's neckline with the other. The Master blocked and parried. He looked to be struggling under the vicious onslaught of the cyborg's assault. He was weakening. Good. "Run, Tessera. You must contact the others." The apprentice shook his head with tears forming in his eyes. "I won't leave you." He reignited his green lightsaber with his left hand, cradling his injured arm against his chest. "I can help you, Master." The Master struggled with all his might to keep Grievous at bay. He locked sabers with the general again, both opponents pushing with all their strength. His arms shook from exertion and sweat dripped down his face. "I said run." Tessera nodded once and then fled from the deadly scene. Grievous laughed and shouted after the apprentice. "I'm coming for you next, boy." The Master was weakened, and it was taking every ounce of effort to raise his lightsaber to block yet another crazed swing from his insane combatant. He force-pushed Grievous from him, enough time to take a quick rest before resuming combat. General Grievous used a calm link on his wrist to convey an order to his troops. Locate the Jedi ship and destroy it. With their only ship destroyed, the accursed Jedi would have no means of escape and would be unable to warn the rest of their ilk hiding on the other moons nearby. It was time to end this. Grievous used a stunning technique learned from Dooku, twirling his lightsaber around and effectively disarmed his opponent. The Jedi Master was panting now, hunched over with both hands on his knees. It appeared that this elder had seen better days. He eyed his lightsaber where it had landed a yard away and made a run for it. The general laughed and ran in hot pursuit. He leapt high in the air and kicked the man in the head, knocking him a few feet away where he lay stunned. Blood dripped down his face and he stared in grim defeat when he saw the cyborg confiscate his only weapon. Grievous approached the elder man and pointed his purple lightsaber at him. "You are beaten. Any last words?" "Why?" Grievous cocked his head sideways to consider the one-word question. "Simple. I hate Jedi." The Master caught sight of 2 additional lightsabers within the general's cloak. He outstretched both hands and used the Force to call the weapons to him. The general in one quick move severed the man's hands from his body, eliciting an agonizing scream. "Those belong to me, Jedi filth." Grievous retrieved the weapons from the ground and attached them to his hip armor. "Your blade is a fine addition to my collection. I did not have a purple lightsaber before today. Now, you die." He impaled the Jedi Master with his own purple blade. He stood by and watched the life ebb from the man's eyes. When he was sure he was dead, he moved on. The apprentice was next. Finding him was not difficult. Grievous knew he had at least broken the young one's arm, but he had been bleeding from a gash stained from one of his sharp talons as well. The boy was despairing next to the wreckage of his former star cruiser. He turned around when he heard the sound of a lightsaber twirling, hoping it was his master. It wasn't. "Hand me your lightsaber and I will make your death swift." The boy stubbornly shook his head. "You aren't taking me without a fight, Slimo." "Very well, have it your way," the general chuckled and slowly advanced in a predatory fashion. He twirled his lightsabers incredibly fast at a dizzying speed and then ran at him with a roar. The boy fumbled with his lightsaber for a moment and activated it just in time to block the first blow. His good arm shook from the strain, his injured arm hanging limply at his side. He used the Force to shove Grievous back, suddenly realizing he was far outmatched. He turned and made a desperate run for it. The cyborg cackled madly in delight to see him flee. He took one lightsaber, the purple one, and threw it sideways. It spun around and in the blink of an eye, decapitated the apprentice. The Separatist general retrieved the boy's green lightsaber and walked calmly away from the grisly scene. He returned to the assault craft and ordered his troops to take him to Yavin 8. He had 2 more lightsabers to collect. The next 2 Jedi weren't even a challenge for him. They were weak. He slew them relatively quickly and set off to destroy the remaining 3 on Yavin 4. The assault craft destroyed some of the local flora as it landed, but Grievous cared not. The temple structure was about 2 miles from their landing site. Grievous ordered all of his mechanized troops to march on the structure and destroy all and any Jedi they might find there. They obeyed his orders without question and marched in synchronized platoons towards the ancient stone structure. When they arrived, it was unnervingly quiet. Something wasn't right. Where were the Jedi? With a flourish, 2 Jedi with blue lightsabers soundlessly leapt down and began dispatching the B-1 battle droids effortlessly. Grievous brought up the rear and watched the growing battle with interest. The Jedi blocked the laser blasts in complete harmony and used the Force to hurl large chunks of rubble at the super battle droids. Before long, the entire platoon of B-1 battle droids was decimated and the Jedi were already making quick work of the B-2s. Perhaps finally, Grievous would at last be permitted to fight worthy opponents. It did not escape his notice that the 3rd Jedi was unaccounted for. Perhaps that Jedi was cowering in fear within the structure. Regardless, the general was going to slay them without mercy. All of the droids were now destroyed apart from his 4 Magna Guards. One of the 2 Jedi already looked to be tiring. Grievous's two mechanical arms split into two more, and Grievous attacked the stronger of the two with four arms equipped with lightsabers, twirling and slicing, bearing down on his enemy. His four Magna Guards joined the fray, attacking the weaker Jedi. The middle-aged man shouted at his partner, who was having a very difficult time defending herself from the deadly Magna Guards. "Lori, we need to get the others out of here. Evacuate immediately." "So they wanted to retreat, did they?" Grievous cackled madly as he shoved the man back, nearly cornering him. The weight of his words finally sank in. Wait, others? There were more than just 3 Jedi on this moon? Good, he needed the challenge, and his lightsaber trophies were accumulating. He roared furiously when the man used the Force to somersault over his head and neatly sliced off one of his extra appendages, forcing Grievous to drop one of his prized trophies. "You'll pay for that, Jedi scum." His rage fueled his vicious attacks, and the man had to scramble to defend himself from the whirlwind of death that bore down on him. Grievous was lost in a fit of absolute bloodlust and completely ignored the second Jedi. She was of no importance if the sounds of her screams were anything to go by. The Magna Guards succeeded in slaying her for him. The droids immediately turned to aid Grievous in his duel. One of them assisted their lord, adding additional blows for the struggling man to block. The two combatants were too focused in their fight to trade any taunts or insults. Grievous usually liked to provoke his opponents into doing something that would surely cost them and ultimately rob them of even the slimmest hope of victory. There was no need to do so now. This man was on the brink of death. Grievous parried and once again disarmed his opponent. He knocked the man down and stomped a large taloned foot on his chest, breaking his ribs. The human wheezed as he struggled for life-sustaining breath. The cyborg laughed wickedly. "You are defeated, and the others you spoke of will soon join you in eternal sleep." The man closed his eyes, and Grievous thought for a brief moment that he had succumbed to death. It was only when a nearby tree cracked and began to fall right on top of him that the cyborg Kalish realized the Jedi's treachery. He cursed and leapt aside. The tree hovered a moment before dropping harmlessly next to the dying Jedi. The audacity. No matter, Grievous was finished toying with this one. He broke the man's neck, ending the Jedi's life, thus putting him out of his misery. Now, to find the others. He walked into the temple structure, merging his 2 extra appendages with his 2 arms. He held 2 lightsaber hilts within his hands but did not activate them. He wanted to be a bit stealthier and hoped to have a slight element of surprise when he found the vermin. His Magna Guards marched quietly behind him. He turned a corner and found a room that appeared to be abandoned. There was a drab-looking blanket covering a small lump of something. Before he could investigate further, a shriek as well as the sound of a lightsaber activating alerted him to the danger long before it presented itself. Grievous thumbed the triggers of his sabers and held them up defensively. A lithe form leapt down from a ledge above him and landed a few feet in front of him. His golden eyes widened in complete surprise. What is the meaning of this? Before him stood a female Kalish Jedi. "You are a traitor to your kind, woman," Grievous spat venomously. "The Jedi were not responsible for our people's suffering." "Lies. They aided our enemy. The enemy that enslaved our race and brought starvation and death to our people. You have a hateful and bitter heart, Sheelal." He took a step back, his golden eyes revealing his shock. "Yes, I know who you truly are. You do not know me, for we have never met before now. I have met one of your wives on Cali. That matters not. You will die for your betrayal." The two engaged in a duel to the death. She was a skilled warrior and was the worthiest opponent Grievous had the privilege of fighting in such a long time. "Because you are Kalish, I will grant you an honorable death worthy of a true warrior," Grievous promised as he continued to dodge and weave in a deadly dance with her. "I will not be the one to die today," she countered as she ducked to avoid a close swing. "You are a true Kalish to defy death so stubbornly," Grievous laughed. The two continued to fight, the female showing no signs of tiring. It was almost going to be a shame to kill her. Almost. A whimper and movement from the blanket caught Grievous's attention. What is that? She rolled clear of one of his downward slashes and crouched in a defensive stance in front of the blanket, protecting it. Your fight is with me. Leave this other matter alone. What are you hiding from me, Jedi? They resumed their duel, the female Kalish leading the general away from the thing on the floor. Lightsabers flashed and spun in a blur of light and a cacophony of sound. They locked sabers and she growled at him, using all of her strength to push him back. She saw movement out of the corner of her eye and turned to see her charge no longer prone on the floor but standing with the blanket draped over his head. He was garbed in youngling Jedi attire, appearing to be at least 4 years of age. The distraction cost her greatly. Grievous shoved her back, twirled his saber and impaled her. Her eyes widened and she stared at the general wordlessly. She fell down, her body slowly going into shock. Grievous walked past her and stalked closer to the child she had been concealing. No, don't, please. She pleaded with him, but it fell on deaf audios. Grievous pulled the blanket off of the child to get a better look at him, and his golden eyes widened yet again in complete shock. This child is Kalish. You were training it to be a filthy Jedi. It's bad enough that you betrayed your people, but to drag a youngling into this was the greatest treachery of all. Grievous took the lightsaber and prepared to slay the child. Sheelal. Don't. He's your son. Her words stayed his hand. He whirled on her angrily. What do you mean? Speak. The Jedi wanted to train him. He's powerful. You kidnapped my son from Kali? Yes. Your son is your last child. She struggled to breathe as the life ebbed from her body. She felt cold. He can't fall into the wrong hands. Protect him, Sheelal. With those words she breathed her last and became one with the Force. The young Kalish cried and ran to her body and rested his head on her chest in sorrow. It disgusted Grievous greatly. Bah! Don't cry for that wench. She got what she deserved. The child looked up at him with mixed emotions. Grievous wasn't sure if this child really was his son. That Jedi scum could have been lying just so he would spare the boy. He felt conflicted for the first time in a long time. He could just abandon the Kalish youngling and leave it to fend for itself on this moon. What if it was his son? Did he really have the heart to kill or abandon it? It wasn't the child's fault that the Jedi whelps kidnapped him and took him far from home. The thought angered him greatly. How dare they? He stood for the longest time internally debating with himself. He accomplished his mission. 7 Jedi were dead. This child wasn't considered a Jedi in Grievous's mind. It couldn't use the Force and had no warrior's training. He turned his back on the child and began to stalk out of the room. The 4-year-old ran after him with a high-pitched cry when he believed he was going to leave him there. The 4 Magna Guards turned their electro-staffs on the child, who was overcome with emotion and couldn't control what happened next. With a great cry, an invisible shockwave rippled out and slammed the Magna Guards away from his small body, destroying 2 that slammed forcefully into a stone wall. Grievous had turned around to command his droids to leave the child be and witnessed what took place. So he could use the Force. Great. In a way, Grievous was jealous that this Kalish child had that power when he didn't. With a growl, Grievous towered over the youngling, finally making his decision. You are coming with me. He picked up the little one, holding him protectively, and returned to the assault craft. The boy did not fight him or protest and remained quiet. They returned to the Malevolence and he ordered his droids to set course for Kali. They jumped to light speed minutes later. He strode into the medical bay and ordered a blood analysis on the child immediately. An hour later, the results were confirmed. The child was his son. Grievous looked down on the young Kalish and studied him more closely. The child's tusks were just beginning to grow. His ears were pointed back in a show of submission. He had scaly reddish-brown skin, as was customary for any Kalish, and had ebony hair, some of it braided. His golden yellow eyes matched his father's perfectly. His 4-clawed hands were resting in his lap, the claws not as intimidating as a fully grown Kalish's, however. This child was the spitting image of Sheelal. The resemblance was uncanny. The youngling stared into Grievous's own reptilian eyes, looking into his very soul. Neither spoke and simply regarded each other in silent wonder. It was time to return home. The first thing Grievous was going to do was get his son out of those ridiculous Jedi clothes. Chapter 2. Grievous knew he had at least 30 children. He knew them all by name. So the fact that his youngest child lacked one annoyed him greatly. "What is your name?" The child did not answer. The little one appeared to be the silent type, or was he just shy? Grievous growled in frustration. "What did those accursed Jedi call you?" The young Kalish opened his mouth as if about to speak but looked away in shame. After another moment of awkward silence, the soft sound of the child's voice pierced Grievous's audio receptors. "The Jedi called me youngling and boy. I don't have a name." Grievous was stunned. How could he not? "Didn't your mother name you?" The boy shook his head sadly. "I can't remember." Those innocent words fueled Grievous's hate for the Jedi. "When we get to Cali, we will find your mother and see to it that you receive a worthy name." His son nodded in silent understanding. He sat still for a moment and then began to fidget. He didn't look at Grievous and tapped a small clawed digit against the medical berth, apparently lost in thought. Grievous was curious as to what he was thinking about. "What's on your mind?" "Nothing." He still refused to look at the cyborg. The general laughed, knowing full well that he was lying. "Oh, but I believe there is. So tell me." His son looked up at him with innocent, golden eyes that looked near identical to his own. "I don't want you to be mad at me." "I doubt I will." The child seemed to be debating internally with himself, weighing the pros and cons of speaking his mind. His greater curiosity won out, overriding his rationale. What happened to you?" The boy gestured to his cyborg body. Grievous growled at the question and the child lowered his head. "I was in an accident." He refused to elaborate further. "Are you really my father?" The Separatist general chuckled at the question. "DNA tests don't lie. So yes, I am. The Jedi told me my father died." Grievous clenched his hands into fists and snarled. He punched a passing B-1 battle droid in the face, knocking its head clean off. "The Jedi lied." The boy's stomach growled and he looked up at him with a funny expression on his face. He was hungry. He didn't voice his discomfort, however. "We will reach Cali soon, a home you were deprived of. There we will find your mother and the rest of our family." The Kalish youngling nodded and then yawned tiredly. He curled up on the medical berth and looked at his father sleepily. A droid walked in at that moment and gave Grievous a routine status report. When he turned back around, the child was fast asleep. A feeling he had not experienced since before his transformation made itself known, and the paternal instinct to protect his son flooded his innate senses. If anyone were to even attempt to harm this child, they were dead. He stood for a few moments watching his son sleep in perfect peace. He would never openly admit it to anyone, but the child was cute. Another droid came in and reported that they had reached Cali. Grievous carefully picked up his son and carried him and boarded a shuttle that would take them to the surface. A bumbling droid dropped a supply crate, causing the child to stir. Grievous remained still. The boy continued to sleep, oblivious to everything around him. The cyborg Kalish growled a clear warning to the droid, who got the message and exited the craft immediately, lest he lose his function. The shuttle flew out of the hangar bay and in minutes, they were entering Cali's atmosphere. The general commanded the droid pilot to land in a field right outside one of the villages. A tribesman greeted them. This one was a trusted friend who had known Sheelal during the Huck War. Only a handful of Kalish knew about General Grievous's true history. The tribesman bowed humbly. "Sheelal, welcome home." "Thank you, Tekar. I'm here to see my family and to return my child to his mother." "I'm afraid your family isn't here." "What? All 10 wives and 30 children missing. How can this be?" "Lord Dooku evacuated them." "Where We do not know. Grievous was angry and pointed an accusing metal talon at Tekar and snarled. If it had been anyone but the Count to have done this, they would pay the price, as would you. Tekar bowed again submissively, recognizing his old friend's temper, and sought to appease him. Shilal, I would never let anyone take your family from you if I had any doubts that they would be safe and in good hands. There was a Kalish traitor who kidnapped my son from his very home. Explain that. There were only a handful of his people he trusted completely, and Tekar was one of the ones he had entrusted with his family's safety while he was away on his missions. There was a Kalish Jedi wielding a green lightsaber. We tried to stop her, but she killed 4 of our best warriors. Fortunately, that Jedi traitor is dead. I'm afraid the Jedi also killed your son's mother. Kitna died while trying to defend the child. Grievous felt a pang of remorse at hearing the tragic news. Kitna was his 10th wife, and the last time he had seen her, she had not yet had a child. His son was her first, and her last. His sorrow soon turned into anger at the one who was responsible for keeping her safe and failed. Your failure will cost you dearly, Tekar. The Kalish warrior took a step back with wide eyes. He could practically feel Grievous's rage rolling off of him in palpable waves. I did everything I could to save her. Grievous split his arms into 4 and activated 2 lightsabers and slowly advanced on Tekar. Blind with fury, he held his son securely in his 2 main arms and laughed devoutly when Tekar got into a fighting stance with his ceremonial spear ready to defend himself. It would be so easy to kill him. The boy awoke and squirmed in fright when his sleep-fogged brain believed he was in some sort of danger. He settled down once he realized he was safe. But that other guy wasn't. Father? What? Grievous spat venomously and glared down at the child. What are you doing? The boy asked innocently. Grievous growled and halted his advance on the tribesman. What was he doing? That was a good question. Tekar was his friend, and although he failed him, did he really deserve to die? Whenever Grievous was lost in bloodlust, it was hard for him to think clearly. If it wasn't for his son's innocent question, Tekar would probably be dead right now. Had Tekar not been Kalish, Grievous knew he would never have granted him any mercy. You have one last chance, Tekar, don't waste it. With that said, Grievous's 2 extra arms folded back in and his lightsabers clipped back to his hip plating. Tekar nodded his head in thanks. I will not fail you again. Thank you, Shilal. I want you to take this boy and see to it that he is clothed and fed. I will return for him shortly. Of course. Grievous handed his youngest child to him, giving him a hard look through his mask that spoke volumes of his disappointment and displeasure. He then returned inside the shuttle to make contact with his master Count Dooku. His hollow image appeared and Grievous refused to bow to him, snarling angrily instead. What have you done with my family? I trust that your mission was a success, the Count said by way of greeting. All 7 Jedi are dead. Now again I ask, where is my family? Grievous hissed icily. They are in a safe, secure location. When I discovered that the Jedi attacked your family, I took action. You have no need to worry, my friend. They killed one of my wives and kidnapped my youngest son. And you recovered him, did you not? Count Dooku's eyes narrowed subtly. Yes. He is in my care. I want you to bring the boy to me. And why, may I ask? The Jedi would not take a child so young unless he was Force-sensitive. I wish to examine the boy myself. As you wish, my lord. Grievous bowed and cut the transmission. It did not settle well with him that Dooku wanted his son. What were the Count's real motives? If the boy proved to be as powerful as that Kalish woman suggested on Yavin 4, then Grievous reasoned the old man would either want to take him on as an apprentice or kill him outright. He preferred neither. If he could have his way, he would train his son in the arts of warfare by Kalish tradition. Giving his son lightsaber training couldn't hurt either. Grievous was going to make sure that this son of his became a true warrior. The general decided to delay the inevitable trip to Count Dooku's lair and strode out of the shuttle. He entered the village and nodded curtly at the few Kalish who greeted him in passing. He arrived before a stone dwelling and invited himself in. This was his old home. Tekar walked past him with a faint smile and out the door, having accomplished what Grievous asked of him. A fire was crackling in the hearth and a Zaka Arms Outland rifle was mounted above it. A Shoni spear was propped up in a corner of the room, collecting dust. A few Mew Mew skulls lay on a table cluttered with old documents and a few modern-day gadgets such as a datapad and hollow emitter. Karabak pelts carpeted the floor and sitting next to the fire sat his son, eating what looked to be cooked fish, vegetables, and biscuits. He was now clothed in a white tunic, tan pants, and wore brown leather boots. A brown child-sized cloak was clasped around his neck, blanketing his small frame. He noticed Grievous's arrival and smiled at him. After swallowing what was in his mouth, he greeted him. "Hi, father. Are you staying out of trouble?" The boy nodded and eagerly stuffed more food in his mouth. Grievous watched him eat in mild fascination. "When was the last time you ate, boy?" The child seemed to think about it for a moment and held up 4 clawed digits to indicate the number of days. 4 days. Did the Jedi not feed you? He shook his head no. Why not? Grievous rasped. He felt another cough coming on. Telariel said not eating would help me focus. The cyborg Kalish laughed and broke down into a coughing fit. He snickered. Those Jedi imbeciles lied to you. You focus better on a full stomach. Warriors need to keep up their strength. She said it was discipline. Did you do something wrong? Was it a punishment? The little boy's shoulders sagged and he looked down at his plate sadly. They said I could eat if I listened to them and did what they said. And did you? No. The boy was angry and slammed a little fist against the tabletop and glared at Grievous. This made the general laugh. You are such a defiant, little one. Good, hate the Jedi. They took everything from you. The child calmed visibly after a long heated moment and then sighed. I said I would listen if they let me see my mother again. They said no. So I didn't eat. Grievous chuckled. You were a good boy, not to listen to them. They would have made you their slave. I wanted to know more about my father. They told me to forget about my mother and to forget about you. The Jedi said that they were my new family. What little blood he had left was boiling at those words. He calmed considerably when he remembered that those Jedi were now dead, slain by his own hand. If only he could have the pleasure of going back and doing it again. Grievous remembered something important. He recalled what the medical droid said upon revealing the test results. His son had a birthday today. You are 6 years old now, and as a gift, I will grant you a worthy name. He thought about it for a moment, pacing a few times across the room until he finally had just the one. From this day forth, you will be known as Zekaloff Quilimek Shilal. Zekaloff smiled. Thank you. Grievous nodded and his golden eyes were smiling. For the first time in a long time, he was happy. He helped to name some of his other children, but this was the first time he had done so without the agreement of his wives. Just being able to name his youngest child himself filled him with pride. He felt he was already forming an attachment to his son that he had never felt with any of his other children before. Zekaloff was truly unique. The child finished his meal and wiped his face with his sleeve. Grievous cleared his throat to get his attention and gestured for Zekaloff to accompany him. There is something I want to show you. The boy skipped to his side and reached a small hand to grasp one of Grievous's large clawed, metallic fingers. It was the closest thing to holding hands that the youngling could achieve. It took his father by surprise. His first impulse was to shake the boy off. These cybernetic hands of his were dangerous and had killed many diverse beings in the galaxy. Besides, he had a reputation to maintain. It was only after his son looked up at him with adorable, trust-filled eyes that he relented. As long as he was mindful, it should be safe. Grievous walked a little slower so the boy could keep up with him, the two walking in amiable silence for a while, until Zekaloff had a question. Where are we going, father? To a special place. Zikolov sneezed when pollen from a nearby plant tickled his nose. They followed a winding path that led them into the jungle. After some time, they reached a temple. They climbed up 2 levels of stairs and entered the main room. It was lit with torches and incense filled the air with a pleasing aroma. In the center was a statue of a Kalish warrior. He had a rifle slung over his back and held 2 swords in his hands. A war mask covered his face and his cloak billowed in an unseen wind. Beneath the statue was a sarcophagus. Someone who was once great in life was now buried here. Zikolov released Grievous's clawed finger and went up to investigate the statue in wonder. Who is this, father? That is Kiman Jai Shilal. It took a moment for the name to register, but when it finally did, he looked at Grievous in amazement. This is you? That was me before the accident. How did you become so famous? Grievous gave his son a history lesson, explaining all about the Huk War and the injustices that were forced upon their people by their enemy and how the Jedi nearly destroyed them. He shared as much knowledge with his son as the boy could handle in one day. Zikolov was riveted by his tale and never took his eyes off of him for a second. Once you become a great warrior like me, the Kalish people will immortalize you forever. What does immortalize mean? It means you live forever. But no one can live forever. In other words, you will be remembered for a very long time. Oh, okay. The boy reverently followed Grievous out of the temple and gasped when his father suddenly held him back with one hand. They were halfway down the stairs. All of the usual forest sounds had ceased. It was quiet, too quiet. Grievous narrowed his eyes and searched for the hidden predator that must be lurking in the nearby foliage. A twig snapped to his left and he growled threateningly. Slowly, Zikolov, walk back up those stairs and get inside. Take this, just in case. Grievous handed him a bone-carved knife that he had retrieved from home earlier, crafted from Mew bones. He didn't yet trust his son with a lightsaber. Not until he was trained. Zikolov listened to his father and slowly retreated back into the temple, watching him from a safe distance. Grievous ignited 2 lightsabers just as a pack of Mew tore through the foliage and leapt right at him, snarling viciously. They must be starving to be so bold to attack a being that was more machine than flesh. He kicked the first one aside and plunged one of his lightsabers through the second. A third one growled at him and lunged to attack. He crushed its skull beneath his sharply taloned foot. It made Grievous laugh. These beasts were no match for him. He was so distracted mutilating and destroying the rest of the pack, he failed to see one sneak past him and make its way up the stairs. Zikolov backed away, holding the knife firmly in his young hand. Most other children his age would be running and screaming, or even crying. He was not most children. He was scared, but he saw how his father killed them. Maybe killing this renegade Mew wouldn't be so hard. The young Kalish tried to hide, taking refuge behind the statue of his father. The incense smoke was throwing the beast off as it tried to sniff him out. That didn't stop the creature from tracking him though. The child's heart hammered wildly within his chest as the deadly animal neared his position. He knew he shouldn't be afraid, his father wasn't. Zikolov came from a race of warriors, not cowards. He stepped out into the open with weapon raised for combat. He felt he regretted that move when it snarled at him and crouched, ready to pounce. It was far smaller than any of the others his father had to fight. This one was practically a pup. To Zikolov, it was big enough. The fear he felt was strong enough to motivate him to dive to the side when it finally did leap at him. He trusted his instincts, unknowingly tapping into the Force. He may be a child, but he wasn't stupid. He was a fast learner, and he carefully observed how the Jedi trained and how his father dispatched the other predators. He knew where their weak spots were, behind the head, beneath the throat, and the middle of their chests. The only thing he would have to do is avoid this Mew's razor-sharp claws and teeth. His father told him during the history lesson that most Kalish younglings killed their first Mew when they were between 10 and 12 standard years old. They were a warlike people, and in this environment filled with multitudes of predators, you had to kill or be killed. Zikolov was quickly learning that. The Mew Mew advanced on him again, drooling hungrily. If it thought it was going to eat him, it was seriously mistaken. It lunged at him, snapping its jaws. He slid beneath it and tried to stab it but missed. It was a good plan, at least when it was in his head. It circled around him, beginning to realize that he wasn't as easy prey as it thought. Zikolov gripped the knife tightly and prepared to roll aside when it made a move to lunge again, but it tricked him. The child dove to the right, and that's when it leapt on him, snarling. Razor-sharp claws dug into his chest, forcing him to scream loudly as he tried to keep the beast from biting his neck. An overwhelmingly strong survival instinct and the innate desire to live flooded his very being. He raised the knife and began to blindly stab at it repeatedly, ignoring the blood that began to gush. Whether it was from him or the animal, the child didn't care so long as the damn thing finally died. Soon it was over and he was pulling himself out from beneath the carcass. The animal was whimpering, on the brink of death. He stabbed it behind the skull, into its brain, and killed it, just as his father had done. He crawled away from it and lay on the floor, bleeding. He sobbed piteously as he struggled to overcome his near-death experience. Grievous had heard his child's screams and finished killing the last of the pack. How in the criff did he miss one? He ran as fast as he could into the temple and had to do a double take. There was a Mew Mew pup. But a Mew Mew nonetheless, dead, killed by a Griffin 6-year-old. His son was in a sorry state. He was wheezing, struggling for breath, and blood soaked his clothes. It appeared that the beast's sharp claws dug into his chest and it bit his arm. He needed treatment immediately. He scooped the child off of the floor and ran, motivated by a different kind of fear. He didn't stop to explain to anyone as he ran through the village and towards the shuttle. He ordered the pilot to take off and practically ripped apart the bulkheads trying to find the damn emergency medical kit. He ripped the boy's tunic off and pressed back to patches to the wounds and applied pressure to stop the bleeding until they could make it to the medical facilities on his ship. The child lost consciousness and Grievous swore, furious with himself. He would be damned if his child died due to his careless negligence. Be strong, Zikolov. If he survived this ordeal, he was a true warrior indeed. And Grievous couldn't be more proud.